In this video, I'm going to break down everything you need to know about buy-to-lets. If you're thinking about becoming a landlord, there's a lot to learn. What are the costs involved? How do I find one? How do I make money? What taxes do I pay? I'm going to answer all of those questions and go through some other things you need to consider before buying your first buy-to-let. Let's get the first thing out of the way, which is what is a buy-to-let. A quick Google search will tell you that a buy-to-let is a type of investment strategy where you purchase a property to rent it out to a tenant. So when you buy a house to live in, that's a residential property, but the one you rent out is called a buy-to-let, and it can be anything from a small flat to a large family home. 24th of September 1996 was the day the first buy-to-let mortgage was introduced. We'll talk more about mortgages later on, but it's only been 27 years since buy-to-let has been a thing in the UK, which to be honest doesn't sound like a lot. So if you ask a buy-to-let owner or landlord why they invest in buy-to-lets, I'm pretty sure most will give you the same reason, which is money. The beauty of buy-to-lets is that there's lots of ways to make money from them. The four main ways are rental yield, capital growth, adding value, or purchasing below market value, or short for BMV. Rental yield is straightforward, where you charge a tenant rent, which is typically more than your mortgage, and the difference between the rent you charge and the mortgage you pay, you keep as profit. A good way of measuring the profitability of a buy-to-let is to look at its rental yield, which is the income you get from the rent as a percentage of the property's value. So let's say you want to buy a property worth £200,000 and you plan to charge £1,000 per month in rent, which works out to £12,000 per year. Divide £12,000 by £200,000, then multiply it by 100. That equals a yield of 6%. The second way is through capital growth or appreciation, which is the amount the property increases in value over time. So to give you my example, right, I purchased my first property in 2013 for £105,000, and sometime last year it got valued at £150,000, which means I've made a profit of £45,000 in roughly 10 years from capital growth. And to think about it, I hadn't done anything to the property, and the reason why I made the money is because on a small island like the UK, over time house prices tend to go up, and the stats, they show that house prices are now 65 times higher than they were in 1970, which is crazy. The difference between rental yield, or the cash flow from it, and appreciation is that cash flow is what I'd call like instant gratification, where the results or profits, should I say, are almost instant, whereas capital appreciation is more of a long-term play, and you really need to be owning the property for 5, 10, 15 years plus to see the profits. But the profits tend to be much bigger than what you'd make from cash flow, so just bear that in mind when deciding whether you want to buy for cash flow or appreciation, because there's no right or wrong. For the third way, I'm going to give my latest property purchase, my 16th one, as an example of how you can make money from finding below market value opportunities. So I bought this one for £96,000, right? It's a 3-bedroom property that needs work done to it. But if you look at this property on the same road in similar conditions, same 3 bedrooms, sold for £120,000. So the property I bought for is technically worth £120,000, and that's why I decided to buy it. I knew that if I could purchase it for £96,000 because the seller wanted a quick sale, then I've technically bought it at a discount and already made a profit of £24,000, and that's how you can make money, by purchasing below market value. The next one, which is my favorite way, is by adding value to the property. Now there's many ways of adding value, like fitting a new kitchen, building an extension, or converting a garage into another bedroom, but the whole thing behind it is that you need to improve or add to the existing property and force appreciation. This property here I bought was in a bad condition, right? The whole living room was derelict, the kitchen, the bathroom, everything was old as anything. Then you can see I had damp everywhere as well. So I purchased this property, added value to it by changing the whole of the inside. So in the end, it looked like this. I was able to make money from this property because I added value to it and forced appreciation. And I really like this way because number one, you're able to make money within a few months once the refurb is done, obviously. And number two is you have a lot more control over how much value you can add to it. When it comes to purchasing a buy-to-let, unless you've got a big pile of cash in the bank, you'll need a mortgage for your buy-to-let property. And you can't choose like any old mortgage. You'll need a specific buy-to-let mortgage. They're similar to standard mortgages in that you can borrow a certain amount amount of money from a bank and then make repayments each month, right? But they tend to have different conditions and stricter criteria. For example, we'll get back to the video in 7 seconds, but 89% of you watching this video aren't subscribed to my channel. Please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and in return, I'll be sharing everything I learned on buying more properties in the next few months, and you can get to learn from my mistakes for free. And now, back to the video. You usually need a minimum 25% deposit for a buy-to-let mortgage, right? Which is a lot higher than your residential. And rather than looking at your income and outgoings to see how much you can borrow as you would for your residential property, buy-to-let mortgages, or mortgage providers shall I say, want to know how much rental income the property is likely to generate. A good ballpark figure is that you'll need to earn 25 to 45% more in rent than you pay each month for the mortgage. So if you're charging, let's say, £1,250 in rent each month, you could get a mortgage where you're paying £1,000 per month. That way, from the lender's point of view, this shows that you'd be able to pay your mortgage if the property is empty between tenants, which is fair. Then there's other initial costs. There's legal fees, which can cost anything between £1,000 to £2,000 on average. There's stamp duty to pay, which again varies depending on the value of the property, but typically it's around 3 to 5%. Mortgage broker fees if you're using a mortgage broker, and I always recommend that you should. Again, it varies, but I've tried a few of them and they charge anything between £300 to £500. And if you're looking to refurb a property, then you need a budget for that, obviously. From a legal perspective, before you rent out the property, at the very least, you will need to pay for a gas safety inspection, an electrical installation condition report, or EICR, and an energy performance certificate, which is also known as EPC. And then of course there's running costs like your mortgage, which is going to be a fairly big chunk coming out every month. There's landlord insurance and public liability insurance as well. So I get asked by investors all the time, where do I find or how do I buy a buy-to-let? And my answer is, before you think about buying a property, you first need to choose it. And what I mean by choosing is understanding the kind of property and strategy you want to go for. So for strategy, you need to decide whether you're investing for yield or appreciation, which we've already talked about before. And I know in an ideal world you'd like both, who doesn't? But the reality is that if you start looking for both, you're more likely going to get a little bit of both rather than be able to make exceptional yields and then profit from significant capital growth further down the line. And that's mainly because properties with potential for high capital growth are usually in desirable areas, and as a result this pushes up the price of the property. So for those kind of properties, you need to raise a larger deposit and make a higher mortgage repayment, which cuts into your overall rental yield. Then you gotta decide whether you're buying close to your own home or not. It could be that you live in a place somewhere like London, and even if you wanted to, you can't afford to buy close to where you live. It could be that other areas are yielding higher returns and you're after the yield. Also, think about whether you're going to self-manage the property or use a management company that will charge you, let's say, 10% of the rent as fees, but can take a lot of admin and hassle off your hands. So you need to weigh up all those things and research the area, keep an eye on redevelopment, the competition for properties, and the average rental yields. Take your time, do your research, and once you're ready, then you can start finding your buy-to-let. Now, when it comes to finding your buy-to-lets, the most obvious place to start off is your online portal. So that's your Rightmove and Zoopla. Another option, though it's not as popular as it would have been like 10-15 years ago, is your local estate agents on the high street. You can also use a deal sourcer that helps find a property based on your criteria and budget. That's basically what my company does. We manage the entire process for you, from finding the property, managing the refurb, and then letting your property out from the comfort of your home. There's also auctions, but I personally don't recommend going to an auction for new property investors, and that's simply because yes, you can pick up a lot of bargains, but at the same time you can find a lot of shit properties full of problems. So you kind of need to know what you're doing when it comes to auctions. But whichever method you choose, whether it's Rightmove, a property sourcer, I always suggest having a clear idea of the kind of property you want based on your budget, your own goals, and then start looking. Now let's talk about taxes, because this is where a lot of people get confused. How much and what tax you pay really depends on whether you're purchasing under your personal name or limited company. Whether it's better to purchase under your personal name or limited company is a whole other video, right? But starting off with your personal name, you're going to be taxed based on your tax band, and bearing in mind that any rental income could push you into a higher tax bracket. You're able to deduct some costs from the amount of tax you like to pay, like your insurance, maintenance, letting fees and so on. But as of April 2020, you're no longer able to deduct your mortgage interest from your rental income. This means that if you rent the property for £1,000 a month, your mortgage is, let's say, £600, you'd make a profit of £400 a month, and technically you should only be taxed on the £400 profit. But section 24 introduced by this guy here, George Osborne, means that instead of paying tax on your profits, you now have to pay tax on the full income, in this case the whole £1,000 a month, which is going to cost you more in taxes obviously. Stamp duty is another tax for buy-to-lets, which is around 3 to 5% depending on the purchase price. You'll also need to pay capital gains tax when you come to sell a property under your personal name. You basically pay this on your profit and is paid at 18% or 28% depending on your tax bracket. Under a limited company, there are similarities with buying under your personal name, like stamp duty. You can also deduct costs like maintenance and insurance fees as well, as we talked about earlier on. But the main difference with a limited company is that you can deduct the full mortgage interest, and any profits you make, whether it's from your rental income or when you're selling a specific property, you pay corporation tax, which is 19% for most companies making less than £50,000 profit. If you're new to the world of buy-to-let, right, declaring your rental income or working out how much your corporation tax is going to be is a new experience. It's tricky, but it's important that you do it. So I always recommend getting help from an accountant and let your accountant do the work for you. It's also important to start thinking about the legal responsibilities you'll have as a landlord. The main things are tenancy contracts, with the most popular being an assured short-hold tenancy, also known as AST. You'll need a deposit protection scheme, which is basically a way of looking after the deposit money your tenants hand over, and if you don't have one, you or your letting agent could be fined, so that's important. As a landlord, you're legally responsible for making sure that people who rent your home have the right to rent in the UK, obviously, and you're legally obliged to provide them with a government's how to rent guide, which looks a bit like this. Although you only have to get the EPC rating to an E at the moment, it's a good idea to start aiming for a better rate, simply because the government will looking to propose a C rating by 2025. So I'm guessing eventually they'll want more than an EPC E rating in the future. So why not start preparing for that now? Don't forget your insurances, buildings, contents and landlord liability. Gas safety inspections must be carried out every 12 months, and you also need to have safety tests performed on your electrics. And then there's other basics, guys. If you really want to do things professionally, make sure your property is actually safe to live in, dealing with the repairs and all the other stuff. I know there's a lot to digest in this video, but if you want to learn more about buy-to-lets, then I've got a video on how to buy a house from start to finish, which covers other stuff to get you started. Subscribe to my channel first, then go watch that video. See you soon.